Nephrons is our subject today, but before we jump in, we got to take a little step back, go back to the kidney. The kidneys are two of the most important organs of the body. The main 5 functions of the kidney are vitamin D. They convert vitamin D to its active form. Red blood cells. The kidneys produce a hormone that tells the body when to make red blood cells. Blood pressure. The kidneys produce a hormone that narrows the arteries in the body, which will cause the pressure to rise. Higher pressure is needed to make sure that blood goes to all parts of the body. Volume of fluid. If the volume of fluid in our body goes down, such as sweating or not drinking enough water, the kidneys will not make a lot of urine until the amount of fluid in our body goes up. The Brita system, as I like to call it, others call it the waste disposal system. Our kidneys act as our own personal Brita filtration system. Our kidneys check out all of the minerals, vitamins, and other nutrients that we get from food, decide what we need, and send out what is not needed in urine. Now that we've gone over the kidney, let's go into the nephron. First and foremost, let's find the location of the nephron. Most nephrons are found in the cortex of the kidney, but there are cases where they're close to the cortex-medulla junction and the loop of Henle goes deep into the medulla. Don't let this picture fool you. There are 1 million or more nephrons in the renal cortex of the kidney. A nephron rids waste from the body, controls blood volume and pressure, regulates the levels of electrolytes, and regulates blood pH. This right here is a nephron in the kidney. This is a drawing of a nephron. This is a little complicated, so we're going to take it, simplify it, discuss the parts, so that way when we look at this, it'll make a lot more sense. There are 2 main parts of the nephron. We have the glomerulus and we have the renal tubule, but that breaks down into a lot more parts. First and foremost, we have the afferent arteriole, which brings blood into the glomerulus, and we have the efferent arteriole, which receives blood from the glomerulus. The way I remember this is E means exit, because the efferent arteriole exits the glomerulus. We then have that glomerulus. It is a knot of capillaries specialized for filtration that is both fed and drained by arterioles. Surrounding the glomerulus is the Bowman's capsule. That leads us to the proximal tubule, which brings us to the loop of Henle. We have the descending limb of the loop of Henle and the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. We then go to the distal tubule and then to the collecting duct. We talked about that efferent arteriole, which receives blood from the glomerulus, and it takes it to the peritubular capillaries. These are low-pressure porous vessels that wrap around the renal tubule ready for absorption, which we will get into and you will understand further in just a couple minutes. The primary function of the nephron is to control the absorption of water and substances that are soluble by filtering the blood, reabsorbing what is needed, and excreting the rest as urine. Let's define the 3 major renal processes of urine formation. First, we have glomerular filtration. This is a non-selective passive process where fluid passes from the blood into the glomerular or Bowman's capsule. Once it is in the capsule, the fluid is called filtrate. Normal filtrate will contain water, glucose, amino acids, urea, creatine, and solutes such as sodium chloride, potassium ions, and bicarbonate ions. Toxin and drugs might be present as well. Proteins and red blood cells are too big to pass through the glomerular filtration membrane, so they are not present in the filtrate. But if there are large molecules in the filtrate, that is for sure an indication of a problem in the filtration process. As soon as filtration flows into the proximal tubule, tubular reabsorption begins. Substances that are needed are taken out of the filtrate by the tubule cells. They then pass those substances into the extracellular space where they are absorbed into the peritubular capillary blood. The reabsorption process happens in 2 ways: passive transport, which is a process that does not require cellular energy, or active transport, which uses membrane carriers that are very selective. Most of the reabsorption process happens in the proximal tubules, but the distal tubule and the collecting ducts are also active. Last in the process is tubular secretion. Some substances move from the blood of the peritubular capillaries and are secreted by the tubule cells into the filtrate to be eliminated in urine. This process is important because it gets rid of substances that are not already in the filtrate, such as certain drugs or excess potassium, and it acts as an additional means for controlling blood pH. To simplify, elements from the nephron back into the blood is reabsorption. Elements from the blood into the nephron is secretion. Now let's draw this process out and see what is reabsorbed and what is secreted. We're going to go ahead and color code a little bit of this just to get the gist of what is doing where. So we have reabsorption. And we're going to go ahead and use orange for active transport. And we're going to use pink for passive transport. We're also going to use a blue to show secretion. Okay, so the blood enters the afferent arteriole, goes into the glomerulus. From there, it's going to go into Bowman's capsule and into the proximal tubule. Once it's in that proximal tubule, there's going to be some reabsorption happening along with secretion. We're going to have salts, bicarbonate ions, some glucose and amino acids that are going to be reabsorbed through active transport. Water is also going to be reabsorbed at this point through passive transport. We also have hydrogen along with uric acid and other drugs, which are going to be secreted into the filtrate. Once it's gone through the proximal tubule, it's going into that loop of Henle. It's going down that descending limb of the loop of Henle. At that process, it is reabsorbing water through passive transport. It makes its turn through the loop, it starts to come up the ascending limb, and it's going to go ahead and reabsorb some more salts, but through passive transport. It makes its way farther up that ascending limb, and it starts to reabsorb salts again, but through active transport. Reaches that distal tubule, coming through here, and it's reabsorbing more salt through active transport again. It's going all the way through this distal tubule to the collecting duct. Now, there's some reabsorption and collection and secretion going on here. First, we got some salts, because we're full of salts that's being reabsorbed. We then have water when it first goes in, and right before it goes out, that's being reabsorbed as well. And we got some urea. We also have some potassium that is going to secrete back into that filtrate. From here, it's going to go ahead and move on into the renal pelvis, which now it's urine, going into the renal pelvis to continue on in the process of the urinary system. And that, my friends, is an overview and detailed explanation of a nephron. Hope it helps you like it helped me.